He checked in under a false name, brought no luggage, and gave no emergency contact. A few days later, he was found tied up, tortured, and barely alive. What happened in room 1046 has baffled investigators for nearly a century, and it's a real-life mystery that refuses to die. Today, on History's Forgotten, we're unlocking the chilling true story of Roland T. Owen, or at least, that's the name he gave. A man whose brief stay at the Hotel President in 1935 ended in brutal murder, countless dead ends, and one of the strangest case files ever recorded. Stick around, you won't believe what investigators found, and what they never did. Kansas City, Missouri. January 2, 1935. A well-dressed man entered the Hotel President, just across from the train station. He was tall, around 5 feet 10 inches, maybe 170 pounds. His face, pale and emotionless. His name, he said, was Roland T. Owen. But from the moment he checked in, almost everything about him was off. He had no luggage, only a comb and a toothbrush in his pocket. He specifically asked for an interior room, room 1046, away from the street-facing windows. Staff noted his oddly formal tone, as if rehearsed. And most notably, he asked for no maid service. But as the days went by, Roland's odd behavior escalated, and room 1046 would soon become the scene of a horror no one saw coming. The next morning, maid Mary Soptic entered room 1046 to clean. Roland sat inside in total darkness, lit only by a single dim lamp. He told her curtly to leave the door unlocked, as he was expecting someone. Later that day, she returned to find him still sitting silently in the dark. The bed was untouched. A note had been left on the desk, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait. Who was Dawn? And why was Roland avoiding daylight, bedsheets, and contact with others? Later that evening, a hotel switchboard operator noted Roland making several strange phone calls. He repeatedly dialed, spoke in hushed tones, and abruptly hung up. A few hours later, a neighboring guest reported hearing loud voices and thuds from inside room 1046. At 7 a.m. the next morning, a bellboy was sent to the room to deliver coffee. The "Do Not Disturb" sign was hanging on the door. When he knocked, a weak voice from inside said, "Come in." But the door was locked from the outside. He asked again, and again the voice said, "Turn on the lights." But when the bellboy unlocked the door and stepped in, what he saw was not a man having coffee. Roland was inside, kneeling, arms and legs bound, neck bruised from strangulation, a towel soaked in blood pressed against his head. The walls were spattered with crimson. He was barely conscious. The bellboy ran to get help. Roland was rushed to the hospital, where a doctor discovered he had been stabbed multiple times in the chest. When asked who had done this to him, Roland's answer was faint but disturbing: nobody. He died shortly afterward. But here's where the mystery deepens. Investigators quickly realized, there was no Roland T. Owen. The name was fake. Fingerprints didn't match anyone in police records. He'd given false details on everything, even claiming to be from Los Angeles. Calls to that address turned up nothing. So who was this man? And why did someone want him dead, after torturing him first? A few days after the murder, a mysterious bouquet of roses arrived at the funeral home. They were accompanied by a card that read, "Love forever, Louise." The funeral was paid for anonymously. Even the casket was upgraded last minute by a caller who simply said, he didn't deserve to be buried in a pauper's grave. Who was Louise? Was she involved? Or was she mourning a man no one else remembered? The police followed every lead. The note to Dawn led nowhere. Louise was never identified. Months later, a woman came forward claiming the man was her son, Artemus Ogletree, from Birmingham, Alabama, who had left home in 1934 to see the country. His mother said she hadn't heard from him since early 1935, but then, strangely, she had continued receiving typed letters signed with his name, months after his death. That's right, someone kept pretending he was alive. They even wrote that Artemis had gotten a job, was traveling abroad, and couldn't call. His mother only learned of his murder a full year after it happened. The trail went cold. But one thing remains: Room 1046 is still talked about in true crime circles to this day. Because no matter how deep you dig, the answers never show. When Artemis Ogletree, if that was even his real identity, was laid to rest in Kansas City in 1936, the case should have ended. But instead, it grew stranger and darker. Let's rewind to one of the most disturbing details in the case: the phone calls. Hotel staff reported several suspicious moments throughout Roland's stay. Voices. Arguments. Footsteps in the hall when no one was there. And multiple calls placed from room 1046, often ending in silence or whispered arguments. One call was overheard saying something like, "No, Don, don't put it on yet. I'm not ready." That name again, Don. Was he the killer? An accomplice? A lover? A blackmailer? Police believed Don was real. But his identity was never confirmed. But the most unsettling element came from the hotel telephone operator. On the night of the murder, she claimed room 1046's phone was left off the hook, not once, but multiple times. Each time she tried to reconnect the line, it was either engaged, off the hook, or picked up and dropped. When staff finally entered the room the next morning, the scene spoke of prolonged torture. Which begs the question: why didn't anyone hear more? Were hotel guests too afraid to report what they heard? Or was someone deliberately covering it up? Then came the letters. Artemis Ogletree's mother, Ruby, received multiple typed letters after her son was already dead. She said Artemis hated typewriters and never used them. But these letters claimed he was overseas, in Cairo, in Paris, in South America. One letter even said he'd gotten married and was happy. The final postcard, dated months after his murder, read, "I'll be back soon. Don't worry, Mom." The letters were postmarked from various cities, all across the U.S. Investigators believed someone was impersonating Artemis to throw people off the trail. But why? Was he running from something? Or had his killer tried to create the illusion he was still alive, to cover their tracks? Incredibly, this wasn't the end. In 1937, 2 years after the murder, a man walked into a New York City hotel and confessed something chilling to a night clerk. He said, "I know who killed the man in room 1046. The man claimed his friend had confessed to him one drunken night." The story matched strange details only someone close to the crime could know. But before police could act, the man vanished. No name. No ID. Just a wild confession in the dark, then gone. The case stalled again. But the whispers never stopped. Fast forward to the 2000s. The hotel president is now a modern-day event space. The crime, long forgotten. But one day, a historian researching Kansas City murders received an anonymous call. The caller said they were cleaning out an elderly relative's belongings and found a strange box. Inside? Clippings about the 1046 murder, dozens of them. Notes scribbled in the margins. Maps. Names. A leather-bound journal. And one object that froze them cold. A hotel key. Room 1046. The caller never identified themselves. They refused to send the items. The historian never heard from them again. But for a moment, just a flicker in time, it seemed the truth was within reach. And then, like everything else in this case, it disappeared. The Room 1046 case, or the Ogletree mystery, remains one of the most chilling unsolved murders in American history. A man with no name. A death with no justice. And a story with more questions than answers. In most unsolved crimes, the missing piece is a person, a weapon, or a motive. But in the case of Room 1046, the missing piece was identity itself. It was as if someone had meticulously tried to erase Artemis Ogletree, not just physically, but from memory, paper, and time itself. Let's revisit the basics. A man checks in under a false name. Tells no one where he's going. Brings no luggage. Acts nervous. Writes cryptic notes. Gets tied up, tortured, and murdered. Then someone tries to pretend he's alive for months after he dies. If that sounds more like a Cold War spy thriller than a 1935 hotel murder, you're not alone. Over the decades, amateur sleuths and historians alike have drawn comparisons between the Ogletree case and covert intelligence operations. Some believe he was a courier or informant. Others suspect he may have been blackmailed or targeted by an underground criminal ring, possibly for something he knew or had seen. But there's another possibility, one that's more haunting than espionage, and more personal than crime. What if Artemis was trying to escape, himself? Some psychologists suggest the case bears signs of dissociation or identity fragmentation. Think about it. No luggage, no contact, and cryptic notes that seem directed not just to others, but to himself. Dawn, I'll be back in 15 minutes. Wait. Was Dawn real? Or a part of Artemis's mind that fractured under pressure? And then there's the setting. A single-room hotel suite. Curtains drawn. Lights low. It's the perfect metaphor for isolation, the slow descent into being forgotten. Was Room 1046 a prison created by someone else, or a cage he stepped into willingly? If Artemis Ogletree was escaping an abusive past, a criminal debt, or even his own psychological unraveling, it would explain the secrecy. But it still doesn't explain the sheer violence of his death. The stab wounds. The torture. The message he whispered on his deathbed. Nobody did this. Why would someone say that, unless they were protecting the very person who had just killed them? Or, blaming themselves? The idea that he may have known, or loved, his killer has haunted many researchers. Some point to the mysterious funeral arrangements. The anonymous donor who paid for the casket. The roses signed, "Love Forever, Louise." No one ever found her. If Louise existed, she either knew the killer, was complicit in the lie, or was mourning the man she tried desperately to help disappear. Others believe Dawn and Louise were code names. That Room 1046 was a rendezvous point for some kind of exchange gone wrong. Money. Information. Or revenge. Still, none of it explains the chilling consistency with which every trace of Artemis was scrubbed away, even before he died. One unsettling theory emerged in the 1980s from a former detective who had reviewed the cold case file. He suggested the crime bore the markings of a long game erasure. A process in which someone is psychologically broken down, stripped of contact, monitored, and finally, eliminated. He said it resembled certain blackmail tactics used by organized crime to silence runaways or whistleblowers. You don't kill them right away, he said. You erase them slowly. That's how you send a message. What if Artemis had gotten in too deep? What if the typed letters sent to his mother were not attempts to comfort, but warnings? He's alive. Don't look. Don't come searching. Some even speculate the letters were meant for someone else entirely, but intercepted and used to send a very different message. We control his voice now. And that's the part that keeps us up at night, isn't it? Not just that Artemis died mysteriously, but that someone tried so hard to keep him alive on paper, even after stabbing the real man to death in a hotel room. There's something profoundly unsettling about a case where every thread leads to silence. Where the victim dies anonymously, and yet, someone mourns. Someone sends flowers. Someone makes the calls, writes the letters, pays for the casket. but never shows their face. It's as if the world conspired to keep him erased, and succeeded. But here we are, almost a century later, still saying his name. Maybe that's all that's left now. Not justice. Not clarity. But remembrance. Because sometimes, the best we can do for the forgotten, is refuse to forget them. Some stories fade quietly. Others echo. Room 1046 didn't just echo, it haunted. It left behind a trail of unanswered questions, broken identities, and a mystery so precise in its erasure, it felt surgical. But that's the thing about the past. It doesn't stay buried. It lingers, in hotel walls, in forgotten files, in cold drawers filled with dust-covered evidence. And in the minds of people who won't stop asking why. Artemis Ogletree, or whoever he truly was, may have died alone, bound and bleeding, in a nondescript hotel room in 1935. But the legacy of that room is still very much alive. Historians, podcasters, YouTube sleuths, and authors have all attempted to piece together what happened over those 3 strange days. Dozens of books, blogs, and documentaries have dug into the case, but no one has cracked it. Why? Because Room 1046 is more than a crime scene. It's a symbol of what it means to be forgotten, and of how far someone might go to keep you that way. Even today, the hotel president stands tall in Kansas City. The room still exists, though it's been remodeled, renamed, renumbered. But if you ask around, older staff will sometimes lower their voice and say, "That's the room. That's where it happened." There are reports of cold spots. Of shadows that move when no one's there. Of guests who check in, and, just for a moment, feel like someone's watching from behind the mirror. Whether or not you believe in ghosts, one thing is certain, this story lives on because it demands to be told. It refuses to be silenced, just like Artemis's mother refused to stop searching, even when the letters lied to her face. In the end, this isn't just a mystery about a dead man. It's a question about all of us. Who are we, when no one knows our name? And what happens when the only version of you that survives, is a note, a lie, a whispered alias at a front desk? Some say Room 1046 was a tragic one-off, a murder gone wrong. Others believe it was a deliberate execution. A punishment. A message. A cover-up. But no theory has ever stuck completely. And maybe that's because the real answer is still out there. Maybe it's buried in someone's attic. Or maybe it's sitting in a file marked unsolved, in a drawer that no one's opened in decades. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there still knows the truth. Someone who made a call. Sent the letters. Tied the knots. And if they're listening now, we haven't forgotten.